And Rotary's played a big role in that.
Rotary has eliminated polio effectively on the planet. There are only 4 countries in the world where polio is still a problem. All of these countries are ones where there's a philosophy that sees all vaccinations, including polio vaccinations, as some kind of an external threat. And so until that attitude changes, in those 4 countries, you run the risk of getting polio. If you're not in those 4 countries, your chances of getting polio are virtually 0.
I remember when the vision was being cast for Rotary. I was a member of Rotary back in the days when I lived in Israel. I was the only Gentile Rotarian in Jerusalem. But I remember the vision being cast, and I thought, boy, what a huge vision that is. But it's been successful.
It has
and
been.
Now you're working with them here in Ontario.
Yes, on a pilot project basis, and I have spoken to more Rotary clubs in Ontario than any other single group, and the message is the same. And of course, this aspect of mentorship is part of one of their 4 pillars of service, avenues of service, I should say, to their society. So it's my hope that as time goes forward, and as Rotary sees that the book is being closed on polio, that they would be willing to take it as their official mandate, because if they do, I really believe it will be resolved.
Yeah. I had the great pleasure and honor of interviewing your predecessor 3 times.
Yes.
In fact, James Barlow and I really connected. I had a show, it's actually still being seen in reruns, called Eye to Eye, and he was a guest. And I was so impressed with the man on so many levels.
Yeah.
But his initiative to up the literacy quotient among First Nations young people, I thought was a noble task. I was thrilled to hear that after he left and you succeeded him, that you have continued to pursue that horizon.
Yes.
Bring us up to speed on that.
Well, it came about as I was wrestling with the notion of what my mandate was going to be, and how I wanted it to be accessibility. And I defined accessibility as that which enables people to achieve their full potential. And I felt that it had to be something that was all-encompassing and was an inclusive definition, so that it didn't just refer to people with typical physical disabilities, but it included non-visible disabilities. It was a very inclusive definition, and that the overall purpose of it was this aspect of full potential. You know, we can't unfortunately wave magic wands and heal people in terms of what we do. We leave that to a higher authority. But as I reached that definition, and it had really formed up in my mind, and I say that the announcement was made by the Prime Minister's office on July 10th. And so within a matter of days, I was just down here. I met Mr. Bartleman the next day, spoke to him on the day of the announcement, met him the next day, and a day or so after that, he was having a farewell luncheon for the various people who had advised him on the formation of his literacy initiatives for the 28 fly-in communities of the far north. Again, fly-in communities, you only get there by plane or ice road. You're totally isolated. 6,000 students finish high school, and they're lucky to have grade 8 standing. What do you do in today's culture if you've finished high school and you've got the equivalent of grade 8? You know, you're just trapped right there. And there's a great, as we were sitting in the dining room, the room right behind us, there was a series of pictures from one of his visits up north. And there was this great picture of this little guy sitting in front of a laptop computer. And his face was just lit up. We don't know what he was looking at. It might have been a rude cartoon, as I've said to people, but it was probably a moment of revelation that he, like, wow, this is neat, this is something. And it was literally in that moment that I just, that it crystallized in my mind that I had to not only continue it, but tell the people at the table that I was going to continue the program. Because as I'd been formulating the idea of accessibility, I thought, well, how do I become the new Lieutenant Governor? And I'm talking about accessibility and helping people achieve their full potential, and then just let this program come to an end. So that's when, in my first conversation with Mr. Bradelman, and in fact, he and I were talking on the phone before the news was released. It was released at 11 o'clock in the morning, and clearly he had been given advance notice here by the Prime Minister's office as to who his replacement was going to be. And so he placed the call. And so that's when I told him.
I'm sure he was thrilled to hear it.
He was.
Oh, yeah. When I interviewed him last time, he'd collected thousands, tens of thousands of books.
1.4 million.
Well, there you go. 1.4
Not that I have the exact number.
So
distributed into 28 communities, and put it into this perspective that they had textbooks in the schools, but there were no casual reading books. There were no adventure stories. There was no Treasure Island. There was no Black Beauty. There was no Huckleberry Finn. There was just nothing.
Now, speaking of which, we've got about 3 minutes.
Yes.
Tell me about Shuttle. A lot of viewers don't realize that you're the author of Shuttle.
Yes.
A book you wrote back in the early 80s, which has had a long shelf life and now is a, what do you call it? Voice
Talking book.
Talking book.
Yes.
Tell us about Shuttle.
I had always had it in my mind that I could write a novel. I don't know why. I think reading a lot of adventure stories when I was a kid, and I think I read Flight into Danger, which was Arthur Haley's book that eventually became Airport. My father was an aviator, was a navigator in World War II, as were his best friends and brother-in-laws, and there was a lot of ex-RCAF types that I grew up around. And I had it in my mind that I could write this novel. And I had finished 1 year of law school at the University of Windsor, and it was an amazing experience, but I knew I was not cut out to be a lawyer, that was not my calling, not at all. And although the intellectual discipline that it gave me, I use practically every day. But I had this idea for a book, and I talked to my dad about it, and I showed him the outline. And he, like being any other, any typical dad, he bragged to a friend of his who happened to be a writer. And he approached that person's agent, and she became my agent, and she encouraged me to write the book, and I did, and it became a bestseller, and it launched me into television, and along the way it became a talking book on cassette. And then just a year and a half ago, a new company bought the cassette rights to have it reproduced as CD. And so now, some 27 years after it was released as a book, it's out as a CD.
It was a touch prophetic in that a big part of the book's plot relates to a shuttle disaster. And
It's true.
This happened, of course, before was it the Challenger?
It was the Challenger disaster 5 years before that.
Yeah.
And although it was a different set of circumstances, it was what made it frankly made it a good novel, or believable, was that it had never happened and that there was a plausibility to it. And but even as I was writing it, because NASA had been so impressive through the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, I thought there's absolutely no way that there's ever going to be a disaster involving the shuttle. I just couldn't believe it at all. But in fact there was, and more than one.
Well, you're a man for all seasons. And we're honored to have you as our Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you.
And thanks for giving us the time.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.